Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Bill Baker with Firestorm, and we're pleased to have you joining us for this webinar that's part of the Crisis Coach webinar series. Today, the Tennessee Association of Independent Schools is hosting and co-sponsoring this webinar series, and we're discussing anonymous reporting, why it works. We invite you to become our friend. Facebook, we're Firestorm Solutions. Twitter, Firestorm Soul. And there is a hashtag. That hashtag is Crisis Coach. Firestorm transforms crisis into value. Firestorm empowers you to manage risk and crises. Firestorm's expertise is crisis management, critical decision support, crisis communication, crisis public relations, and consequence management. Keep in mind that the presentation today is not complete without the accompanying oral comments and discussion, and the work product must be read in conjunction with your organization's personal counsel, and the information given and comments made should not be interpreted as legal advice or legal opinion. We're pleased to have the Tennessee Association of Independent Schools as our co-host and underwriter of the Crisis Coach webinar series. Today, we're discussing anonymous reporting. Our presenter is Jim Satterfield, president of Firestorm. Jill, do you have anything to say to welcome our people today?
And I'm glad we've got Jill and not that rich guy. You're so much.
Yeah, I'm offended. It's Rich Martin and not me. I just wanted to welcome everybody and thank everyone for attending the webinar today, and also to remind everyone that Jim is actually coming to Tennessee to put on a day-and-a-half workshop with crisis management. It'll be held, I believe, at Montgomery Bell Academy, and we hope you all could join us for that. And we're excited because we have several more events coming up on mindfulness, strategic planning, science standards, and our biggest ones are the two back-to-back events for technology. One is for iTunes U, and the other is our Technology Institute, where we'll have 52 sessions for our attendees to choose. So those are our upcoming events.
Sounds like a lot happening. And Jill, you were saying you're getting a little snow up there today.
Yes, it's very pretty. Not a lot, but it's pretty.
Well, that's great. I like it when it's the pretty and not Boston where there's too much and nobody knows what to do with all of that.
Yeah, that would be awful.
So I'm looking forward to seeing everyone in April as we spend a day and a half going through managing a crisis and communicating and experiencing that, and we will do a tabletop exercise and let everyone experience what it's like to make the decisions and focus on the communications. And it's always a great opportunity to be there and be together with you, so I look forward to seeing everyone at that session. So as we look through here and talk about what's going on at this point in time, I'm Jim Satterfield. I'm president and founder of Firestorm, and look forward to sharing with you today. And the question that I think that's in all of our schools and each of our school communities is, can we identify our school's next crisis? And you see the statement there, we can, but more importantly, you can. You can do to be able to take advantage of that and know what's about to occur and be ready to respond in each of those areas. Now, whether we're thinking about the weather today, the snow that's happening in Tennessee, which looks like it's going to be minor and not affecting us, there are other things that are going on within our schools that if we were aware of it, we could intervene before it occurs and mitigate or prevent it from ever happening. And that's what we want to talk about. And today we're going to spend some time talking about anonymous reporting, and we'll review what's worked and what's not worked and what the needs are to have those in place. And that's one of the elements of creating an intelligence network. The other elements are background checks, the analysis of behaviors of concern. Those become critical along with the monitoring of social media. And we're going to talk today about how all of that comes together with an anonymous reporting program to give you the intelligence that you need. So how do you know what you don't know? And the answer to that is you've got to create an intelligence network. And our goal in doing that is to know today what's going to happen tomorrow. And that, wouldn't you want to know that that gun was going to come to the school tomorrow today so that we could stop it from ever happening. We've just had a couple reports coming in today of some incidents that are happening in schools across the country, and we're seeing, unfortunately, they didn't know about it until the gun was already in the school. But it could be someone that's experiencing domestic abuse at home. It could be someone with a substance abuse problem. It could be some other element associated with it. So we don't want this to skew toward just being about an armed intruder as we talk about those elements. So we do that by following a predict, plan, perform process. And the planning is making sure that everyone in the organization, everyone in the school community knows what to do and when to do it. And then the performing is the training and the testing of those elements. Our goal is continually to transform uncertainty into certainty and to have metrics so that you can know what's happening as you carry forward. But in order to know, we have to listen to what's being said, and we have to look at particular behaviors of concern or people of interest or a person of interest, so as we focus on those elements. Now, we've talked in other webinars about this concept of listening and looking. Let's just stop here for a minute to go back and reinforce some of this, and you're going to hear us continue to talk about this theme next month as we really get under the covers more in an intelligence network. Listening is a general situational awareness, just like we listen and hear what's going on around us. Once something that comes up is a particular concern, then we can look at a more targeted exposure, and then we can evaluate it on a much clearer basis. Now, listening is, if we think about social media as an example of listening, there are streams, there are phrases, there's words being used. Gun in school could be an example of a phrase. Well, if you heard about that, then you would want to go back and look at who's saying that. Who is their sphere of influence? How can we go back and better understand what's being done? Similarly, if we have an anonymous report, let's go and take a look at that individual, that student, or that teacher at a closer level as we understand it. Now, in addition to working with schools, we work with businesses, and the same things that we find that happen in our schools happen within companies around the country. We have a client that's a Fortune 10 company, and we were looking at one of their distribution centers and put up a geo fence around it. That's the ability to look at everything that's happening within this fence from a social media perspective. And so we were able to follow who was posting onto social media. We found an employee at this distribution center that made 80 posts within one 8-hour shift. Leads you to wonder, did he have things that he could do at his job? And in fact, he was saying that he was bored and wasn't doing much. But through the post, through his shift, he was sharing with the hundreds of people that had linked to him that he had problems with his boss, that he felt that there was racial discrimination, and that toward the end of the shift and the end of the day, apparently it had gotten worse. And he came and he said, look, the only way I'm going to resolve this is with a gun. I'm bringing a gun to work tomorrow. Well, there's clearly an example. If that was happening, you would want to know about it if that was a story within your school. Because what's appearing on social media today will occur tomorrow. And when we think about social media, it's not random. It's targeted. And the similar things that we can think of behaviors of concern and understanding those. And we're going to talk about that in more depth a little bit today, but it all comes back to this concept of listening and looking to understand what's going on. So as part of this in creating an intelligence network, last month we talked about the behavioral risk threat assessment, and we've mentioned background checks before and social media monitoring, and we'll continue to share on both of those topics. But today our focus is specifically on anonymous reporting and the value that it would play within your school and some of the challenges and difficulties. Why has it not always worked well? Why have we not we've had people who've seen things and not come forward and talking about it. As we think about this, let's keep this definition of crisis in mind, a risk event for which no one has identified the vulnerabilities and exposures, has not developed a plan, and therefore does not know how to respond. Often I tell everyone that the last time a surprise was good, I was 5, and it was my birthday. Well, if you think about it, if people in your school community know that there's a problem, don't you want to know? Don't you want to know first instead of last, or more importantly, before an act of violence or otherwise a concern would come forward? That's what our goal is to talk about today and help you identify what works and what doesn't and why. Now, the quote that's up on the screen now is one that just came from a teacher. And we took the teacher's name out, and it says, "I knew when it happened that that's probably who it was," referring to a former pupil. "I would have been shocked if it wasn't." How many times after an event do we see similar quotes where someone comes forward and says, "Well, I knew that," and they feel the question then becomes, why didn't they come forward? Why didn't they share that before it occurred? Why did they wait until it occurred then to make the observation after the fact? Because now it's too late. Whatever happened in this particular scenario, it happened, and it could have been prevented. It could have been mitigated. And because someone didn't come forward, the violence occurred. Now, anonymous reporting, there are a lot of things that have been happening across the country in this for a long time. The most common one, and the one that everybody immediately thinks of, is 911. I'll pick up the phone and call for the fire, the police, the medical, and it's been very successful. And if you see an act of imminent violence, that's exactly what we've all been trained to do. People know how to do this, and it's done, and it's a universal, immediate response to the emergency that's occurring. But anonymous reporting goes before this to identify that there's a behavior of concern and that there's an issue that would be helpful if it was addressed much earlier in the process. Now, we're very fortunate in America that we have policemen that run toward the gunfire or the firemen that run toward the fire to be able to help in those directions. But again, from the time you make this call till the time that the police arrive, there's a delay. We are a fairly large employer of retired Secret Service agents, and they regularly share that when seconds really matter, the police will be there in minutes. That's the reason why you have all these plans in your schools now. That's the reason why you do drills about fire, armed intruder, shelter in place, lockdown, lockout. And those are great because they're all designed to buying you the time for help to arrive. Because from the time this call is made to the time that help arrives, there's a delay. And that's what your plans will focus on. But if we can identify this much earlier in the cycle, much earlier before that gun enters the school or before the overdose takes place or before the bullying or the sexual molestation occurs, then that's what we want to do. That's our goal. So the federal government, after 9/11, worked, and there was a campaign that came out of New York City first with, if you see something, say something, and then it was adopted by Homeland Security, and it's been promoted aggressively since 2010, but yet there are not thousands and thousands and thousands of calls every day with observations that are going on. Could that be because there's some distrust that in fact it's confidential, or some disbelief that in fact somebody will care or take an action? And so it tends to undermine that program as it would come together. Now, there are good parts of this, and clearly when you look at what to do if you see suspicious activity, who and what you saw, when you saw it, where it occurred, and why it looks suspicious would all be very helpful. And then you see if it's an emergency, go ahead and call 911. This is certainly an element here, but that's not going to resolve the issues that we have in our schools where our students and so our faculty or our parents are aware of something and haven't yet come forward. Now, in the state of Colorado, there's a program called Safe to Tell, and this has been geared specifically to the public school system across the state of Colorado. And this is one of the findings from the Columbine Commission. And when you just say the word Columbine, immediately we all think of the shooting that occurred there, not the fact that it's the state flower for Colorado. As we focus on that, there have been calls into this, and suicides have been prevented, and interventions, and even guns had been stopped before they came into school. And so the idea of make a call, make a difference is certainly a valid one. And I think there's some strength here. But if you look at this, anonymously report anything, this shows you a potential gap that could be incurred. If people don't truly think that the reporting is anonymous on the federal site or on the 911 or on this, then they're going to have a reluctance to do it. And in fact, if you look later on the Safe to Tell website, you'll see the word right in the center of the screen where it says disclaimer. Should Safe to Tell become the victim of prank call, the line will be forwarded and traced with law enforcement notified immediately. So it's telling you it's not truly anonymous, and that's a big difference. 911 experiences problems because as the operator is talking to someone, they're dependent upon the cell towers to help them triangulate in many cases that the call is coming there. We just had a death recently outside of Atlanta where a lady drove off the road and into a lake, and as the car was thinking she was calling 911, but she was apparently just over a county line, and the wrong 911 center got the call because of the cell tower, and help didn't arrive till 20 or 30 minutes later, and it was a problem. But it has to be anonymous. Whatever you set up in your school, if it's not perceived as anonymous, it won't be effective. Now, the Safe to Tell did a great job on their website in many respects, and they gave them some reasons to tell. And you look at all of these, if you saw any of these occurring in your school community, wouldn't you want to know about it? Wouldn't you want to know about it in advance? And the answer is, of course I would. That's why we want to try to create this environment. So this is a universal problem. It's not a Colorado public school problem. It's not just an independent school in the state of Tennessee problem. It's a problem that we have across the board. You have to make it easy and simple to gather that information, and we'll talk about that. But more importantly, we're going to be talking about how you create a culture of communications within your school to reinforce this behavior. Now, some statistics, and the two that I really want to draw your attention to are the two that are in red here. 80% of the time there's leakage. Leakage means that somebody else knows. But look, 2/3 of the time, more than two people know. Two or more people know. And so that's why anonymous reporting works so well and why you want them to come forward. You know, we shared in some of our webinars a picture out of a school where a student had a gun in the classroom and had posted it. And the thing that was very startling to the head of school was that 34 students in their school had seen the posting, but not one of them had come forward. That was extremely disappointing. So it shows that the knowledge and the information is there, but we have to create an environment where it's safe, have that knowledge come forward, and then importantly, if it does come forward, it has to be acted on and acted on quickly. Now, if you look at some of the other statistics here, they tell us an interesting story. When you think about the 75% bullied, or 60% were feeling depressed, and 75% had a history of suicidal thoughts or actions, those are all behaviors of concern that someone can see, and if they see those behaviors of concern, they can report it, and then there can be an intervention before something happens. That's really the basis of anonymous reporting. That's why we're talking about it this morning. And whether you're listening to the broadcast live or listening on a recorded basis on demand, it's something I want you to think about in your schools. What are the warning signs? And if you look at the quote here, almost every disaster or incident of workplace violence, act of terrorism was preceded by warning signals. Does everyone in your school community know the warning signals? Is everyone empowered to share that information with you, because it becomes extremely critical as we go forward? So let's stop for a minute and talk about the culture within your school community. And let's talk about what is culture, and then we're going to specifically focus on a culture of communications and what we can do about those things. So culture, its beliefs, its attitudes, its values, and the other elements that give your school community its unique personality. If you were talking with some parents about why their child should come to your school, immediately you're going to go to the culture, the support, the learning environment, the moral emphasis that you have, the growth that could occur. That's who your school is. And this culture defines how people are free to make decisions, how everyone's treated, how information flows, ideas, and business dealings. And that generally doesn't change over time. It's pretty constant, and you're trying to create this value proposition, this understanding of your culture. And it's not always something that's written. It's an informal aspect in many areas. That's what culture's about. But does your culture support someone coming forward if they see something and sharing that with you? If it doesn't, then it's not going to happen. You'll be like the school with the student with the gun, and 34 students saw the posting, but not one came forward. So if we're going to think about creating a culture of communications, why has it not worked before? Not in other schools and other companies. Why hasn't this worked? Well, sometimes it's a top-down approach. It doesn't have the support of the students, of the teachers, of the parents within it. That the tools haven't been assembled to do this. The anonymous line or the suggestion box or the monitoring tools to look at social media to see what's being said. There's a lot of speaking by leadership, but they're not listening to what they're hearing back. If someone doesn't agree with what they have to say, that tends to be omitted. It creates frustrations within the organization, and people who really don't totally buy in that it is okay to share. It's not snitching. It is the type of thing that we wanted to do. If when you're trying to create this culture of communication, if it doesn't fit with the culture of your school community, then there'll be a gap. And that's a gap that we need to address. And you need to design a program that's going to work for your school, with your unique culture, with who your brand is and what you carry forward. So in trying to create that culture, you want to align with the culture of your school community. With all the independent schools in the state of Tennessee, there are differences. Make sure that the program is one that works in your school community. We want to embed a sense of preparedness into everyone so that they know when they see that they have an obligation. We all have a commitment to protect each other, that I've got your back, you've got mine. And if you see it, we're going to take what you tell us very seriously, and we're going to act on it. And it's going to be safe to tell us, even if it turns out not to be right, and it truly does give you an opportunity to be anonymous. So we need to change from where we're doing a communications program to building a culture of communications. If it's got to be two-way, it's got to be both speaking and listening. And when you look at this and it comes in, if you're not listening, that information is going to be there, and you're not going to be able to act on it because you won't have heard it. And when you listen, then you need to take a closer look, because we want to avoid the rumor and the innuendo. We want to have actionable intelligence as it comes together to create this intelligence network. And always our goal is to know today what will happen tomorrow. So in creating a culture, we need to first understand what exists today. It starts at the top, at the head of our school, the board. That's where the culture change is needed to start, to make sure it supports who you are as an organization and as a school. You want to keep the strategies and tactics simple. If it's a 47-page form, nobody's going to fill it out. But if it's a simple call or dropping a piece of paper in a suggestions box or sharing that information, you want to have it come together. I would recommend that you start to measure the culture within your organization, surveys and interviews. And is it changing over time? Are you starting to see this starting to come together? If you don't start first with this understanding, then it'll be a failed effort to create anonymous reporting. The information will be there, but no one will share it with you, and it will make it more difficult. You can't ignore the culture that currently exists within your school. You want to maintain relationships with your leadership, but also leaderships within the students, within the parents. But this is starting from the top and working through the entire organization. And recognize if there's a change in leaders that will impact our culture. And so how we instill this to become part of the values of who we are. So can we really predict a crisis? The answer is yes. If we focus then and look on what the warning signs are, and if those warning signs are seen, they're shared. If they're not shared, it won't do any good. So it's both the recognition and the sharing that will make anonymous reporting work within your school. So we have indicators, and indicators would then be an element to see. If you see that, that's an indicator that there's a problem. A student who has normally been doing well and suddenly starts doing poorly in class. If attendance is a problem. If someone used to be outgoing and now they're more introverted. Understanding what these indicators are going to be extremely important as we focus on it. And we've seen that there are identifiable patterns that will tell us the severity or the frequency of these types of events. That's what we want to focus on in looking at them. The value in identifying these pre-crisis indicators are to find the crisis before it happens. That's the goal that we all have in helping our students and our teachers. And by the way, it could be a teacher with a problem just as easily as it could be a student. So everyone must understand the warning signs, the behaviors of concerns, and understand that any threats or statements of intents to cause harm are unacceptable and must then be immediately communicated. Now, we have to validate it. We have to go through a process, but that becomes a critical element of who we are as a school. And if we don't provide that training, we're going to find that we're missing opportunities to make a real difference associated with it. Let's talk a little bit about urgency and the predictable intelligence concept. Communications is the most perishable form of intelligence. If you learn something in July, it's probably not going to be of much value to you in February. So if you hear something now, we need to act on that now, not later. And the information changes. And so intelligence, as we're starting to create this, is very time sensitive. And that's a key urgency factor. And we particularly see this with depression and suicide and acts of violence that would be coming together. And as we think about predictive intelligence, there are two types of data, hard and soft. Soft would be the human behavior that occurs, the intuition, the experience, the expertise of the people that are looking at it. You know, you look at something and it just doesn't look quite right to you. You hear something and it's just, you know, something's a little off in going from that. And we don't want to underestimate the value of that soft data, because that can be an indication that would lead to an anonymous report that would help you then to better understand. You would look at that individual who this is about before you take action, but you can't wait. That has to happen quickly in the process. Hard data includes email, social media postings, and admonitions of intent. Fortunately, in this area, this is where technology can help us. We don't have to wait in every case for the anonymous tip to come in. This is the intelligence network that can be created through monitoring of social media. And as those 34 students, one of those must have been the one who posted that statement out and started to share it and to come up. That's what we're looking at trying to do, to be able to pick that information out quickly and respond. It also gives us the ability to go back and look at a particular student. If you had an anonymous report that a student was having difficulty, then you could go back and look at the postings regarding that student, look at the sphere of influence, who they're talking with and what they're talking about, to get a fuller, broader picture of who they are and what needs to be done. And so technology can provide us those capabilities. And when we do the workshop in April, we'll share some of that so that you can see exactly how that intelligence network can be used before, during, and after a crisis. And then finally, all the information has to be accumulated somewhere, and a central repository is needed so that you take a fact that you heard over here, something that someone saw there, and a posting, put them together, and it shows you the pattern of what's occurring. It's going to tell you about how frequently it happens. It's going to tell you about how severe that it would be. Now, whether you do that through your counseling office or how you handle discipline, or maybe you have a human resource function at your school, there needs to be a central repository that information comes into. And if there isn't, it will be lost. And then we will miss one of the cues, one of the clues that there's a behavior of concern and that an intervention is needed. Now, let's talk specifically now about how we go about creating this culture. And the number one item is the first one at the top of the screen. We have to provide confidentiality. And there has to be an assurance of that, because if we don't, people aren't going to see and share. The report will never come. And so that's why we went back to what's the culture of your school, how you're creating this culture of communications, how does it all come together. We also have to do education about snitch mentality. Many people feel it's negative for them to come forward and share. We saw a report just recently where everyone, like the teacher earlier, had said, well, yeah, I knew that this was a problem. But none of them had come forward and shared that because of fear of the fact that it wouldn't be confidential, that they wouldn't be treated properly. It could be as simple as the suggestion box. And in fact, we would recommend that you have multiple channels within your school to get this information that's out there. Simply dropping a note in a suggestion box might be a way to learn something that you didn't know that could be dropped in. If you do a suggestion box, you want to have it in an area where there's some opportunity of privacy to drop the note within the box, and that the box must be checked multiple times during the day, because you don't want to have, because of the time sensitivity of information and the intelligence becoming perishable, meaning it doesn't have value, you want to be able to get that and respond quickly. Additionally, think about a confidential phone number. The Safe to Tell program in Colorado is a good example of that. The Georgia Independent School Association is going to be piloting a program shortly around creating an anonymous reporting line and program within the state for the independent schools. And as that program goes, it'll be something to think about in Tennessee. Or you might want to have it just for your school alone. Confidential phone number is an excellent way to do it. It could have a recording machine on it. It could go to a service. There is some concern on a phone call that someone might be able to, well, oh, that's Mary's voice, and understand it. So again, the confidentiality assurance becomes very critical. Has to have a text capability. If you go to dinner, you'll see teenagers texting back and forth across the table instead of talking. There has to be the ability to come in there. I would recommend that there's a simple downloadable app that you have, that everyone has it on their phone, and they're encouraged to use it. Even putting a portion of your website that could come in with a report or a blog or some other way that the privacy of the Internet can be used to share and gain that information. You must create this intelligence network, or you're going to lose the opportunity to act before the event. And that puts you in a position of reacting afterwards, after it's already had an impact on your school community. Surveillance detection talks about training everyone in their of recognition of the behaviors of concern, and being able to share that, and looking on the Internet and the postings that are there. Just as some of you have video cameras around your school to recognize who's coming and who's going, monitoring that and understanding what's going on in terms of social media and others become important. Training everyone of how to access the information, the controls that are placed around that, the confidentiality that will continue to go forward, the human resource procedures. Background checks are just not at the beginning of when someone's hired. It's annual for all of your teachers, but beginning to understand and intertwining that with this intelligence network becomes important. And we've got to train and alert our people. To see something, say something. If you see it, share it. Has to come forward. Coordinating with local law enforcement so that if you do get a report, they understand the severity of it and they're there. If we can know before the event, it gives us the luxury of having the police there with us to help us at those points before trying to respond after the event had already occurred. Also, having relationships with outside psychologists, if you don't have one in your school, even a forensic psychologist that can help you interpret that behavior of concern. We can talk about establishing a behavioral risk threat assessment program in your school and a protocol of what that team looks like and what questions do they ask as they determine, is this at a guarded level, an elevated, or severe, because the actions and the steps that you take are different depending upon how your team assesses it. And then last, testing of your plans. We test our fire plan very well. We do fire drills regularly. Many of our schools do armed intruder testing or lockdown, lockout, shelter in place, evacuation training, following standard protocols. But I want you to test your plans to see if there was knowledge of an issue, if you became aware of it. If there was a knowledge of a behavior of concern, are you becoming aware of it? And designing a testing program where you look and see if someone comes forward will tell you a lot about your school. Because I think that, unfortunately, we're going to find that, as the percentages tell us, 2/3 of the time, 2 or more people already know. But those people that know aren't telling you and sharing that information with you. And I think the idea of share versus tell is a good one. The kids would kid about, I'm going to tell on you, and that has an immediate negative connotation. But if I'm going to share is a much more positive word. I'm going to share this information with you. I'm going to, because they're concerned about helping others. And I think the culture of our schools, and particularly our independent schools, that needs to be very important. I would challenge everyone on our call today, and those that are listening on recording, to go back and think about how they can test how their school performs in this area, and what percentage of the time does that information come forward as it's shared. So those are the things that we wanted you to hear about today as we talk about creating a culture of preparedness. That becomes an important element for each one of our schools as we carry forward. At the end of the day, it's, do you really want to know what's going to happen tomorrow? And if you don't, can you afford not to know? Someone in your school community knows what's about to happen. Someone knows that a student's at risk, that there's domestic abuse or sexual molestation or violence or suicide. Those types of things are there. But you must know that, or you're going to be in a position where you have to pick up the phone and call a family and explain that their son or their daughter won't be coming home from school today because of something that occurred. We want to know now what will happen tomorrow. So if you have questions about any of this, you can contact us at Firestorm to help align your plans to best practices, to help you create your own intelligence network, or even schedule some crisis coach training. I want to remind everyone about the day-and-a-half workshop that's coming up in Nashville in April. If you want an analysis of where your plans are relative to standards and best practices, this is being underwritten by the Tennessee Association of Schools. It's a $2,500 value, and it's available to your school at no cost. That's a great place to begin this study and analysis. Our thanks to the Tennessee Association of Independent Schools for underwriting this webinar series and programs. In fact, do you have anything else you want to add at this point?
For me, no, you did a wonderful job, and we always get so much out of everything that you have to share, and we look forward to seeing you in April. And if those of you who are debating whether or not to come to the April event because it's so difficult to get away from school, one of the reasons it's a day-and-a-half event is that the second day is just a morning time where you can sit down and work with others and Jim on your crisis plan and have someone else lay another set of eyes on it to help you make it the best it can be. So we hope you all can join us in April.
Well, we look forward to seeing everyone there and working through this process. There's never a great time to get prepared, but clearly in the middle of a crisis you understand that it's too late. We certainly need to have response programs in place, shelter in place, evacuate, lockdown, lockout, but understanding that there are behaviors of concern and creating a culture within your school that it's safe to share what you're seeing becomes important. And that's when I would challenge you to go back and survey your school, look and see what's going on, talk to others. Is that the case in your community? Because today, someone knows. But unfortunately, that someone is not you. And that's what this is all about today. How do you know what your next crisis will be? Someone does, and we want them to share that. So you can contact us at firestorm.com. You can drop us an email at webinars@firestorm.com, or you can pick up the phone and call us at 800-321-2219. We look forward to your call. Gertie Knox, who is our Firestorm principal that's focused on helping our schools in Tennessee, will try to reach out to those on today's webinar to see what questions we didn't have a chance to address and give you answers to. But establishing a program and that it's safe to share, that anonymous reporting is a key element in having an intelligence network, is something that we all need to work on. It's a part of our culture, the values that we stress and push, and it's something that I would encourage you to have within your school. Thanks, and have a great day. We look forward to talking with you next month as we continue focusing around this creating an intelligence network and how do you know what you don't know. Have a great day, everyone. Goodbye.